All right, what is up? How we doing? Hopefully you guys are having a good Wednesday night. It is another Guilty Gear Strive character tutorial that we're doing tonight, featuring Nagoryuki. And the person I have joining me tonight to kind of go over this character and everything has been a good friend of mine for the past couple years. Really strong player in a lot of different games. You may recognize him from Under Night as being a game that he really excelled at, especially with his Waldenstein play. But he's excelled in a bunch of other different games as well. It's my good friend Argenrost that is going to be showcasing some Nago stuff tonight. Argen, how you doing, my man? Everything going all right?
Yeah, doing pretty good. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Of course. You and like I say, you and I go back a couple years and stuff like that. And like as I was putting this series together, and when I knew I was going to be getting the Nagoryuki stuff like that, I definitely wanted to have you on because I always, whenever we've talked about certain characters in certain games and stuff like that, we've always had like really good conversation, and I really like how you portray things and how you break things down. So like I'm super excited about having you on to kind of showcase and talk about Nago in a sense and everything. But, you know, before we go into the character, I kind of preluded a little bit of, you know, your history with fighting games and everything, stuff like that. But for those, you know, who may want to know a little more about you and only know you from the Under Night perspective, kind of share with everybody what else you've done as far as your fighting game history, so to speak.
Sure. So, I mean, I guess I could say that I've basically been playing fighting games since I was a kid, but that's probably not fair because, I mean, I was basically just a glorified button masher up until, like, probably, like, 2006 is when I first, like, started really playing fighting games in a more serious capacity. My first, like, actual competitive fighting game was actually, like, probably CBS 2. That was one of the first ones that I actually entered, like, a proper tournament for.
Mm-hmm.
My first, like, actual, like, real breakout tournament, I guess, was like 2008, where I played, like, CBS 2, KOF 11, and a little bit of Accent Core at the time. But really, like, from there, I just kind of branched off into a ton of different things. I was, like, super excited about fighting games at the point in time in my life, so I was just playing, like, anything and everything. I really started getting a lot more into anime fighters with, like, the first version of BlazBlue, Calamity Trigger, as first as that game was. I enjoyed it a lot for the time. And then really, there, I guess, my bigger breakouts were more in, like, early NRS games, like Injustice 1, and then eventually Under Night, particularly EL. So I played Under Night basically since, like, you know, early 2014, essentially up until now, and that's kind of been like one of my things. But you know, I go anywhere and everywhere, whatever is like most enjoyable to me, I guess. But really, kind of what I gravitated towards the most.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. You know, it's funny. We've always had conversations or anything. I never knew that you were a CVS 2 guy as well. So, who was your CVS 2 team? I gotta know. Who'd you play in CVS 2?
Oh God, like, so really the character that I spent the most time on was Iori, actually.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I played a lot of Iori. My tournament teams would actually look more like the one that I played at the tournament in 2008. That was like kind of my main team was C Yamazaki Rugal Sagat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you felt like you had to have Sagat somewhere in there. Yeah, my team was K-Groove, Cammy, Bison, and Sagat.
That's a good team.
Yeah, I was definitely all about the K-Groove stuff. That was like my favorite groove, especially with like the instant blocking and all that stuff and everything. So that's cool. Good to know. Maybe one of these days we'll see about trying to get CVS 2 going sometime, because CVS 2 is like my favorite fighting game of all time. So I'm definitely all about it. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get right into it. Let's talk about Nagoryuki in Guilty Gear Strive. And when this character first dropped, it was kind of interesting because I don't think a lot of people knew what to make of the character because he was so different and so unique with his mechanics and how he operated and everything. And when we were kind of talking about how we wanted to present this and everything, you brought up the point of, I think the first thing that, players who are looking to pick up Nagoryuki and looking to explore this character to see if it's a fit for them or not, the most important thing about this character is learning the blood gauge and how his blood rage works and everything. So, let's go ahead and start with that, because that might be the most important aspect of this character.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so basically the way that blood gauge works is that whenever Nagoryuki performs a special move that isn't his command throw, the blood gauge that you see above the tension bar will go up a little bit. This number is slightly different depending on what moves he does. But generally, the more that you do, the more you build up the blood gauge. To the point where eventually, when you fill it up, this happens. So this is called Blood Rage. It is a state that changes a lot of the character's properties in a very significant way, and I'll kind of get more into that as we sort of go through the breakdown. But really, the crux of this character is understanding how the blood gauge works and managing it so that, despite how cool Blood Rage can look, it is an extremely high-risk state to be in. So you really want to formulate your game plan and make your actions very deliberate to the capacity where you avoid it in situations where it could lead to a lot of bad things happening. However, there are merits to actually building up the blood gauge to certain levels, and that mostly is emphasized in very particular moves, which I'll also get into when I get to those moves.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a pretty good, I think that's a pretty good start with understanding the blood gauge. Obviously, as we go more in depth of what his key moves and everything, stuff like that, people will kind of see how it kind of works as it goes through. So, but this character is a character that is also very footsie based, very neutral based, and I know traditionally that's always been your style of play and what you've kind of excelled at as far as your play style and everything. So it definitely makes sense of why you picked this character to play in this game. So let's kind of go over some of his key normals, some of the things that Nago players should utilize right out of the gate when they're trying to learn this character.
So Nago has really, most of his normals are very useful for different things depending on the situation. But if you want to talk about the ones that are probably the most important to really learn how to use, it's mostly his slash and heavy slash normals. Primarily because, first of all, they're usually his best poking tools and best source of damage. But also they actually help you with your blood gauge damage, which we'll kind of get into. So just to start off, we'll go with his S buttons. So first of all, there's bar S. Very reminiscent, how Maru standing medium punch, if you're familiar with standing medium, I guess. If you're familiar with Samurai Showdown. Straight poke, lots of range. Not very fast, and the hitbox isn't very high, so if this gets jumped over, you're probably in for a bad time. But yeah, you do kind of free it, but yeah, it's quite a bit of recovery on that. But it is still a very, very good poking tool. And furthermore, this move isn't just a standalone thing; it actually goes into a target combo, which is actually just done by pressing bar SSS. Like that. So each hit of this target combo has a set of properties to it that are fairly interesting. So when you do far SS, you see that the animation is kind of set up in such a way that it sort of looks like he's about to swing, compared to just letting the whole thing rip. This is actually -8 on block, so it's technically not safe to do this, but one of like the very early tricks that you could kind of do when you're learning this character and get used to, it'll probably hit people that aren't as experienced, is if you just down back this, you can actually use pick throw off. Because even though it's technically unsafe, it recovers in kind of a weird way that's like a visual trick that will catch people off guard sometimes. But you can still do, you know, stuff like that with either command throw or regular throw, as desired. Now, the reason that it's still kind of threatening to mash against this, if you're not paying attention, is if you just like block the first hit and then try to mash. Well, okay, so yeah, just block that first hit and then immediately start trying to mash while you're blocking.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, so that third hit is actually a proper frame trap. And even though you can't usually get a whole lot off of that counter hit, you can still get an OTG hit in some situations. And if you're really clever... Oh, if you want to go ahead and set the counter hit again.
Yeah, and I'm mashing the punch. There we go. There we go.
So, yeah, you can see there that you can actually kind of react to that counter hit with something like a purple RC and then get like a full combo conversion off of that. And if that particular hit counter hits, it's actually the scaling on that is not a whole lot, so the follow-up combos can be pretty big.
Yeah.
So there is a threat there off of that particular target combo. And also, actually, if you want to do the same thing again, you can actually do something far more rude. Where you just do that. Oh, sorry.
Did it too early.
Okay. Yeah, so that's also a frame trap, and it's a very big counter hit, and it hurts a lot. Like, a lot.
Yeah.
We'll get into that when we get to, like, special.
Yeah, that move, in a sense, is, as we'll get into specials, but that move is definitely a party starter for Nago, for sure.
It is the party starter, for sure. Okay, so then, next we have 2S. This really is, like, you know, like, Far S obviously has the range, but 2S really is, like, more of your standard poking normal. It's faster than Far S by a decent margin. It's low, so that's always good.
Yeah.
I've always kind of got the image in my head that, like, Nago 2S is kind of like the Street Fighter crouching medium kick of this game, because it's really fast, it has a lot of range, and it's also actually, like, only -5 on block, even if you don't cancel it into anything. So if you're properly spacing it, like, no one's going to be able to do anything. So it's very easy to just kind of throw this out and hold the ground a bit. And it's, of course, it's also cancelable, but basically whatever you want. So doing something like 2S and spin is like a pretty standard 2-in-1 that often gets you a lot of leverage and lets you get things started with your game plan. So I would say this is definitely one of the more important buttons to learn how to use effectively, like really get used to what ranges you can use it, stuff that you can do off of it, things like that. And then next for S button, this one's actually probably one of the scariest buttons that Nago has, actually, is close S. This button is pretty fast. I think it's actually... yeah, this is actually 7-frame startup, which is pretty reasonably fast.
Yeah.
And as you can see, it also launches on hit, which there are many things you can do with this. If you want to keep it simple, you can even just kind of immediately go into like your forest combo off of it and get something decent. Other fun things you can do, you can actually link this into 5K, which is a little bit more of a thing where it's like, you know, if you're trying to kind of react to whether or not they get hit by this, you can do stuff off of it. Better in the corner than mid-screen, but there's still potential there. And even when you block it, it's actually +3 on block. which is not necessarily like an uncommon property for close S buttons in this game. There are a handful of characters that have close S's that plus on block.
Mm-hmm.
But when you consider all the other characters all the other tools that this character has, it's just one more thing that kind of emphasizes that Nago is really one of the more game characters in this game, which is something that you kind of hear a lot when people talk about Nago. So really, like, once you get in on somebody and start your offense, this is where a lot of like the threat comes from. Not even just because it's plus on block, but also you can actually kind of like cancel the recovery. You have like a very long window to be able to Gatling to something else, like a 2S or 6H or something like that. So even if you think that they're going to try to do something that's a little bit more creative, and you feel like mashing on a +3 on block normal, there are many reasons to be scared of doing so. So there's like really just a lot that opens up once you establish this in offense.
Sure.
Okay, so having covered those, I mean, might as well just cover Jump S. This isn't really like anything super special, but it is kind of your best like horizontal hitbox jump normal. It's a pretty good poke. It's decent for air to air. It's okay for jump ins from further away. Not necessarily something you can expect to get a huge amount of reward off of, but it's probably one of your better air normals to get used to using. Just as like a thing of like, you know, people want to fly around in the air and you're a little bit worried about trying to do something a little more grounded to keep them down. This is like kind of a safe way to just feel like, hey, just, you know, stay on the ground. Like we're gonna play my game right now. Another important thing to note about S normals, which also applies to H normals, is that if I have a bit of blood gauge built up here, you'll be able to see that when I hit with S normals, you see that little blood particle that kind of floats out and goes back toward Nago. This actually recovers the blood gauge on hit. The target combo actually restores a lot more. So if I kind of build this up again, then it can target combo. You see there's 3 particles that come out there, and the recovery is actually quite a bit significant. Heavy normals actually recover the same amount as the last hit of this target combo. So really, when you're trying to manage your blood gauge, that's really where more of like the heavy normals come into play. But that target combo is also a very nice way to get some consistent damage and also kind of get some blood gauge back and like combo conversions. If you're really trying to like stay out of blood rage. So that's kind of it for S normals, and then for H normals, this is where we get to the really fun stuff, because this is where blood gauge levels really come into play a lot, and we're going to showcase some of those differences in a second. So 5H, so when you have 0 blood, this normal seems kind of underwhelming. I mean, it hits pretty hard. It obviously knocks back a lot with soft knockdown. It's a good chunk of damage. It heals, or it recovers like about half of a bar of, like, you know, 1 partition of blood gauge on hit, like most heavy normals do. Yeah, it's like about half.
Yeah.
And so on its own, like, you know, it hits pretty hard, but it's like, you know, it's a little bit laggy. It's not super fast. It probably has about like the same roughly as 2S. Like, it's kind of whatever. But when your blood gauge level goes up, things get a little different. So now I'm at blood level 1, and suddenly this has quite a bit more ring. Like if I hit 2S, and then you see 5H, look at the difference.
Yeah.
So this is when I'm doing it at like blood level 0. It's about the same, right? Now at level 1, that's a big jump in range.
Yeah. It looked like half of the hitbox almost grew basically, just after going to level 1 to blood gauge.
Yep. So this is a thing that, you know, if you probably saw like footage of like Beta 1 Nago, this wasn't the thing. This was something that came to light, and I think it was in the later betas, but I mean, obviously it's in the actual launch version of the game. So whenever Nago has blood levels beyond 0, his heavy normals in particular actually get buffed by a pretty significant margin. They do more damage on hit. They have significantly increased range, and they also actually start up faster. So, like, a 0 blood 5H, I think, is like 16 frames on the startup.
Mm-hmm.
It's like slow-ish, but I guess not like when you roll for heavy. At blood level 1, it actually goes to 14 frames. So it actually is 2 frames faster, and it has a pretty significant increase. On top of doing a little bit of extra, like 63 versus 52 in this case. So
Right.
That's a pretty good chunk. It's like a 20% increase in damage, basically. Now, when you're at blood level 2, this is where the party really starts. Because just look at this ring. Like, just stand there.
Oh, jeez. That's a full screen poke. Almost just about.
Basically. Yeah, this goes, it's like probably safely 2/3 of the screen.
Yeah.
So this is where Nago goes from being sort of this, like, oppressive, like, pressure monster to basically becoming a zoner.
Yeah.
So the startup on this decreases again by another 2 frames. It's now a 12 frame poke, which, by the way, is the same as your 2S. It does like another like 20% damage, and also has absolutely bonkers. So this just kind of emphasizes how, even though you're riding the risk of getting blood rage very quickly, just being at a state of like level 2 blood is extremely powerful. This character really does turn into like something of a new god. He's at level 2 blood just because of like how powerful like this normal is. And not just 5H, but really this one is like the one that completely controls the ground space in like obscene ways. And I mean, you know, if you get like a counter hit on this, like it's, you know, there's like, you get pretty big payoff off of that because it's more of a hard knockdown, and yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
but yeah, so actually, is there a way to counter hit in this? No, it's a little weird. But basically, like, this becomes like more of a hard knockdown that you can follow up with stuff afterwards, and pretty much guaranteed push somebody in the corner, just off of a stray hit in footsies. So really, when you're getting more refined with this character and managing levels properly, just utilizing 5H and level 2 blood, like, it is such an oppressive, so hard for people to get around it, and it really changes a lot of Nago's matchups, like, almost on its own when it's available compared to when it's not. So I would say that getting more experienced with like balancing your blood gauge level, this is like a really, really important thing to learn how to use. Now the complement to this is that, well, okay, so I mean, this is obviously a really good move, and I could just jump over it in theory, right? You know, especially if you're playing a character that has like a fast air dash, then, you know, like, it's still very good, but if you throw it out willy-nilly, like just jumps over you, then you can't really benefit from it as much. Well, I mean, thankfully, Nago has 2 HP. You can see that even at level 0 blood, this is very, very good. At the tip, it won't really hit quite as much as vouchers. But I mean, obviously this covers like a massive amount of airspace even at level 0. It has a lot of active frames. It is very, very laggy on width, but this still is like, it's definitely not a reactive anti-air normal, but it is very good at preemptively covering that space if he wants to jump. This is especially useful in the corner, because when you're like kind of at this range, 2S threat and like 5H's of threat if you have level 2 blood, people are usually going to want to jump to be able to get around most of those tools, and then you're just kind of preemptive 2H them. It's essentially secured up. They're not going to be going anywhere. And you've already kind of seen what blood levels do to 5H, but with 2H, like, you can kind of see how this sort of stacks up. Where at level 2 blood, it's like this big, and it's also quite a bit faster, which makes it easier to use. I guess it's more of a reactive anti-air, but you know, really just the space that it covers, how fast it does, the active frames, like, you know, it makes it so that between 5H and 2H at like higher levels of blood, you really just like have this complete mid-range dominance that most characters really cannot. So I guess that's really the main things to cover for like those two. But we cannot discount 6H, which is one of Nago's command normals and one of the more important ones for a lot of other aspects of his game plan that 5H and 2H don't cover. So this is 6H. It actually has a pretty good vertical hitbox on it, so really it's just like sort of a wall normal. Not particularly slow, even at 0 blood. It's, I believe, technically Nago's most damaging normal. And the counter hit on this is like rude. So if you just want to block, I'm just gonna do 5k 6H. So dash after you block the 5k.
All right.
So you can probably already see where that goes. I've already done like 114 damage, and I didn't really even do anything. But so this is, I mean, it's not safe on block on its own, certainly, but like most of Nago's H normals, the cancel window in this is very, very long. So, yeah, see, like, that was, you know, technically canceling, and that was, like, very, very late into the recovery of the movie. So even though it doesn't seem like it's safe, it can be very scary to match against.
Yeah.
And furthermore, when we kind of get into special moves a bit more, you'll see that there's actually, like, a lot of applications of pressure to this. And with blood levels, of course, it gets bigger, it gets faster. You know, the properties here are very much the same. It's just inherently better at doing what it normally does, just by virtue of, you know, existing, I suppose. Actually, it also, before I get too ahead of myself, now that we've kind of covered like the S and H normals, there's one other important property that Nago has that not many other games have. It's a point. So if you just hold down back, if you look at the life bar, you're actually taking chip damage. And so this is just kind of a thing that Nago has where all of his normals that use his very large katana actually do chip damage on block. So even if you're not necessarily hitting people, you can still apply a lot of pressure to doing stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, on top of the fact that you're just inherently building risk gauge by them blocking, and just like all the properties that his moves have, like there's really no way to be comfortable against this character when you're like defending against him because you're pretty much taking damage no matter what. And this level of damage goes up quite a bit, like when blood levels go up. But like even if I'm at like level 2 blood, like look how much chip damage that did.
Yeah.
Like everything here is just doing so much chip.
Yeah. It's a lot of chip being done.
Yeah. So, that kind of makes it so that, like, you run into this dilemma where, well, okay, now I need to really faultless defense against the character to keep from getting chipped to death by a bunch of, like, normals with very large special cancel windows that can potentially lead to plus on block situations. But then I'm still kind of pushing myself out to this place where, okay, well, now he can just keep himself at level 2 blood and put me in a range where I literally can't compete with, like, any of these normals. Even just learning how to, like, pressure with all these normals properly, especially the H normals, will probably give you a lot of mileage for not a lot of effort and not even a lot of things. So really, it kind of opens up the thing that's really cool about Nago as a character is that there are really multiple different ways that you can play this character and multiple different paces that you can play at depending on which I think explains why so many Nago players have very different ways of approaching the character. And like there's so much creativity that comes out with like the way that certain players decide to use the tools that are available to them, things like that. You can actually afford to keep it really simple with this character and still experience a lot of success if your neutral is really good. Which is one thing that I really, really like about this character.
Right.
So beyond that, we've kind of covered the bulk of that. So just to cover a couple of other things, the jump H is pretty much your standard jumping normal. It also gets bigger when you're at higher blood levels. You can't really instant overhead with this quite, at least not in a normal state, but it's still very obviously a pretty good jumping normal for coming in. Pretty much a decent poke on the way down. You don't usually end up in the air too much when you're playing Nago, but if you're going to come down with something, this is the button to do it with. Other notable normals for specific purposes, 5P, for reference, is your fastest normal at 5 frames. 5 frames startup is, I guess, pretty average for like a fast for some characters. One thing that's nice about Nago in particular is that doing like 5P 6P into spin is a pretty good like quick combo. Like you actually get a pretty solid amount of damage and OP off of hitting your fastest button. So like if you're trying to match out a pressure or something like this, or you want to punish something that's not really punishable by anything else, this is really just kind of a good thing to do. It doesn't really hit some crouchers at like certain positions, so you get P for that if you're trying to do that, which is 1 frame slower but a little more reliable. But even just being able to like do like this combo is pretty good for just having like like just being able to get that off of a fast button. Not a lot of characters can like, get a whole lot off of just like mashing the fastest punch. So it's surprising that Nago can get that. Other notable things, 5K. 5K is actually a really, really good poke. It's a much safer one than like Bar S because it doesn't have as it's actually 0 on block, which is very, very nice. Like the that it has, and you can convert this into stuff too. So it's pretty nice. This is actually kind of like one of your better pokes for doing stuff like May Dolphin Pressure, or like other situations where like 5P is not really gonna, because it's 7 frame startup, so it's still relatively fast. Just all around a really good normal. And 2K, this is like your quick low. It's also 7 frame startup, I believe. The thing that's really notable about 2K is that it actually has a lot of active, surprisingly large number of them. Let me double check.
All right.
Yeah, it actually has like 5 active frames.
Oh wow.
So
that's actually pretty active for a 2K.
Yeah. So you can't get a whole lot off of this. Like, you're pretty much only doing 18 if you're really trying to get with it. But the main application of this is not necessarily to get reward off of it, but for the fact that it's pretty decent by virtue of having a lot of active frames. But really, this is mostly useful.
Gotcha.
Because like in a lot of round start situations, especially, like at round start range, like you can hit 2S, but 2S is like 12 frames fast. And, 5K doesn't reach them at round start range, so you can't do much with that. And far S is like really, really slow. It's like framed or something. So a lot of characters are usually going to have like basic round start options that are probably better than yours. But most of those will actually just lose to 2K. Simply because the hitbox on it is pretty good. It has a lot of active frames on it. It's pretty fast. So, like, yeah, I guess, are you able to set up, like, a round call, or
no? What would you want me to try to do? Like, Vortex or something like that?
Not really. Even just like far S. Like
okay.
Round start.
Alright. Round start? Alright.
Yeah. Just as kind of an example.
Yeah, so, there it is.
Yeah, so like...
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the point's there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Didn't want to harp on it too much, but I just wanted to point out that it's like, if you're struggling against people that are like mashing like really strong round start options, like Pip doing like far S or Soul mashing far S, you can actually stuff a lot of stuff with this.
Yeah. It seemed like it was a pretty good hitbox, like, out of the gate with that, too. So, yeah, that seems like it's a... Because at first when I was looking at that move, I was like, man, it's not a lot of range on it. But, yeah, it's got a good hitbox, and with it being as active as it is, it definitely looks like a move that can stuff a few things. And then, obviously, if you do get a counter hit 2K, you can go into, like, a few different things as well to kind of create the space that you want with Nago if you want to play that type of game.
Yeah, like it's definitely one of those normals where I did a little bit of a double take when I saw just how much stuff it was beating. So it's definitely something to keep in mind.
Gotcha. Real quick before we do progress any further, hey FJC girl, thank you for the raid, greatly appreciate that. Diver, I see you in the chat. What's up, buddy? How you doing, man? And yeah, dude, when you said 5 frames of it being active, that definitely was an eye opener when it comes to this 2K.
Yeah, it's surprising just how good this novel actually is for just, like, interesting poking situations. It catches a lot of people off guard.
Yeah, I was gonna say that definitely seems like that's probably an underrated normal of his, because yeah, just seeing stuff Souls 5K far S like that, yeah, that's it's definitely a good stop sign move. It seems.
It's really astonishing just how much round start stuff it beats. Yeah.
Good to know. So there you go. Round start, Nago players, utilize that 2K. Looks like it's a good one.
It's very good.
All right. Any other normals you wanted to go over before we go into specials?
I mean, 6P. His 6P is pretty standard. It's just good upper body. I mean, it's still pretty good for dealing with just like random pokes. It'll beat like a Soul Far S. I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Pretty plain.
Yeah.
So it'll beat basically anything that 6Ps will expect to beat. It's not like particularly amazing, but I mean you can still do it in the spin, which is pretty decent reward if you're trying to just let it rip. 6K is another command normal. This one is mostly just useful as like kind of like combo starter fodder off of like a random 5K poke. It does actually stagger on counter hit, and you can't usually get a whole lot off of the stagger, but Actually, I'll just do 5K, 6K, and then just mash up to 5K.
Okay. There you go, yeah.
So, you can usually get something like a 2S afterwards, depending on if they match or not. It's not a thing that comes up very often, but it is worth noting. I think 6K is like -6 on block or something like that. So really this is another thing with like you can kind of stagger it into like a special if you think they're going to mash or punish you afterwards. Just kind of like an interesting close range option to use. And I guess really that's like most of the important stuff, I would think.
Gotcha.
This is Jump Dust. It looks really cool. It's basically combo fodder for like the really flashy stuff. It wall bounces if you're in the corner. So, like I think it can. So, I can do kind of a setup on this. Looks weird. Well, okay, so I mean, I'm not gonna worry about the too much. It's more flashy stuff. It's not really the most friendly, but it's basically just like interesting combo fodder if you're trying to save on blood gauge. Not really one that I would use in full, but it also kind of halts your jump momentum when you do it. So there's
yeah,
tricky things to do with it.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Okay, all right. Well, let's go ahead and then go right into specials because Nago definitely has, to me, like definitely some of the cooler specials in this game with how he works.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's get a couple things out of the way. So first of all, one thing that makes Nago unique, which you've probably seen me do a little bit of just messing around, is that Nago can cancel the vast majority of his specials into other specials. Like so. So, a lot of special cancels happening there all in one go. So, on top of the fact that he's able to cancel specials into specials, the vast majority of Nago's special moves in a vacuum are kind of busted in terms of their properties. But the reason for this is because, as you've seen, whereas Nago's like large katana normals will recover his blood gauge, doing pretty much any special move will build some. So obviously, the more of these that you do, the easier you're going to push yourself into blood rage, and the more that you're going to end up in a high-risk situation. So the balancing factor is that, well, his specials have to be incredibly broken because he can't do very many of them without, also managing his blood gauge on them. So we'll talk a little bit about what these are used for, and maybe go over some ways of how to use them creatively or conservatively to keep blood rage happening. So the first one that I want to cover is, it's probably important to cover this one first because it really kind of adds flavor to everything else that's happening with this character. And that's actually his teleport, Fukio, which is 236K or 214K. So this is just a command dash that goes pretty good distance. There's a fair amount of sliding momentum on it after it recovers. But really this is Nago's primary movement because he doesn't have a forward dash, and he doesn't have an air dash, and he doesn't have a double jump. So his mobility otherwise is very limited, but this allows him actually to cover a lot of distance. So your command dashes build, if you want to start getting into numbers a little bit. So if you think of the blood gauge as being 300 points, where each partition is 100, your command dash builds about 40. It's a little less than half of the bar.
Okay. Yeah.
So you can do quite a few of these before you start really pushing yourself a little too much. Which is nice because being able to move around a fair amount without putting yourself in a high risk situation helps a lot of situations. Really, what makes these command dashes so good is how they're used in like a variety of special situations. And when you understand the recovery of these command dashes a bit more, it starts to put things in perspective. So for the forward command dash, the recovery on this is about 25 frames. Now that's like for a forward dash, that's relatively slow. 25 frames is reasonably reactable if you're looking for it. So usually just doing it, or even doing it in some pressure situations, you'll usually get pretty prone to being matched on. But it's still good for forward movement. It's good if you're creative with your timing, catch people who are like falling asleep on defense. And I mean, of course, it's just good for general forward movement. The backdash is really where it gets dumb. Because the recovery on the backwards teleport is actually 16.
Oh,
which
wow.
is
That's a significant difference.
Fast.
Yeah, that's a significant difference.
If you know much about how like dash startup is normally distributed in like some other fighting games, you would probably know that this is pretty fast. And because of that, you can create a lot of very situations. So one of the quick things is that, as I mentioned, there is sliding momentum on these, but if you just like kind of hold the opposite direction after you teleport, even if it's like down back or something, you can cancel that sliding momentum.
Okay.
Now you can probably see how this is useful off of the backdash, because I can, instead of sliding all the way back here and being ineffective, I can just do that. So, well, okay, that's fine. That's happened to me a couple of times in tournament, and I was very bad at it. But yeah, so like, I can leave easily out of range, focus on something. That's like pretty fast. It's like very difficult to react to that.
Yeah.
Now, this is particularly applicable in a couple of ways. So if you just block real quick. This very simple sequence is going to get you a lot of mileage against players that are inexperienced, giving 6H and that dash. The 6H is normally, fairly lengthy on the recovery. Not particularly safe on block unless you cancel it. But because of the fast recovery of backdash, if you actually do 6H and the backdash, so go ahead and block the 6H and then jump afterwards.
Okay.
So, keep in mind that Nago has a longer jump start than most characters in the game. And we're jumping at, like, roughly the same time. And that's considering that I'm probably, like, leaving the ground a little bit after the are. So, this particular sequence is actually, like, +2 on block, I believe. Coming down from, like, minus double digits, essentially. So, in the corner, this gets really nasty, because if they mash on this at all, like, it's already really hard to mash against it from that distance. God forbid. Like, it's so easy to just do this and be able to, like, score a free counter hit, or even just like a big knockdown. Really, this is like one of the better pressure sequences that this thing has. Off a very beefy normal that does a ton of damage, does a lot of chip, and then it's also plus on block to boot. So this is just kind of an example of a sort of situations that like hand dashes create when used properly. So I'd say it's probably a pretty good example there. But even just being able to do stuff like, if I'm gonna, I'll do a third combo and then I dash back and try to mash and then I dash something.
Right. Yeah.
So there's just because of the recovery of the backdash in particular, there are so many like easy baiting situations that you can create to get people to mash and create a counter hit, and then get like usually really big payoff off of that, because that's what this character really excels with.
Yeah.
And then when they finally just kind of give it up on mashing because they realize they're going to instantly die the second they mash. That's when you whip out the forward dash and command throw and, start really, suddenly you've kind of opened up the world of this is really like how much mess you can create and how much you can get into sets.
Yeah, especially with the fact that, like you were mentioning, with conditioning your opponents in a sense with getting those, especially you get like the real big counter hit party starters or anything, and they're eating a ton of damage because Nago is a character that does a lot of damage. Basically conditioning them to be scared to just kind of do whatever, and then it sets up your other layers of offense that you can have with that.
Right. Okay. So going on to the other stuff, so that we're not spending too much time fixating on things. Let's get to the actual specials that like do damage.
Yep.
So first of all, we have to talk about Beyblade. So this is 214H. Have probably seen this a lot in a lot of Nago gameplay because it is an incredibly powerful special for many reasons. It is fast. It has a lot of range. It is a hard knockdown on hit, and it is 0 on block. So even if you block this, there's kind of the threat of, well, if you do nothing, then you can probably just get thrown. And, if you're like too scared of the throw, then there's a possibility that if you mash to the weight, you get hit by close S, and then probably get hurt way more. And this is, not considering the fact that you can also spend something like a backdash if you really want to create speed again. Or perhaps it's really rude. I'm going to do spin and then go ahead and mash afterwards.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty beefy.
That's also a very beefy counter hit that leads to a ton of damage.
Yep.
So really, just the threat of this move comes from the fact that it's like it can get mileage from so far away. It's very difficult to contest. It's good at hitbox. It's even on block. It can be staggered into so many things that it's like it's always really scary to try to mash against it in any way. This move actually builds 90 points of bludgeoning whenever you do it. So like almost a full bar. So obviously you can't do too many before you start to use more rage. But you can kind of see that even though the risk builds up for you, the payoff is very, very large. It's really very little incentive to not do this move if you feel like you're in a situation where you're not really going to get much mileage in doing this. It's really just a very high risk and relatively low reward, and it really is kind of the cornerstone of a lot of the scarier stuff that Nago can do. So moving on, since we already showed it, this is 6G. This move is not super... I wouldn't say this move is terribly special compared to like some of the other moves that Nago has, but it is useful because it does have upper body invulnerability. So it's actually a passable anti-air with a pretty good hitbox. Again, not really a reaction. You can see that it hits pretty high. It's also a hard knockdown on hit. But the most common application of this really is usage in combos. Because if you special cancel this, specifically the first hit of it, you can see that even the first hit is still a hard knockdown, which allows you to do like either OTG stuff or just the fact that it launches so high allows you to do like a lot of combo bottom. So really, yeah. So it has a couple of nice properties here. Good to know. It still does a decent amount of chip. It's kind of hard to punish it, even if you let it rip on its own. It does pretty good damage on its own. But really, the key use of this is for like mostly combo fodder and also like staggered situations, like the one that I showed earlier with spin into uppercut, basically. Because the counter hit on that is also very deep. That's a lot of damage in any situation. So not as much of a standard move as some of the other stuff that he has, but it definitely has its pressure in most of them. So next, cover 236S. This move is actually also very, very strong for different reasons. First of all, it's a projectile. It's also a projectile that tends to beat other projectiles outright. In fact, I'm pretty sure this move actually beats basically every projectile. I think it even beats like Rents, like Axel's. Now, this move, like 623H, actually, all of Nago's more offensive special moves they all build 90 points of blood gauge. So you only really get to do a couple of these before you start putting yourself more into blood rage territory. So even though all these specials are very powerful, you get kind of limited out of them. But what's really nice about this projectile is that even if you do this at point blank and you block it, it's +5 on block.
Right.
And that's at point blank range.
Yeah.
So you really just like you can absolutely pile on the pressure with this. The best application of this, of course. Yeah. This is by far the safest way to do a forward dash and still be able to establish some kind of pressure on the opponent. And in some situations, like from far enough away, if they get hit by the projectile after the forward dash, you can still combo after. Now, granted, because you have to do success into a forward teleport, it's pretty expensive on the blood gauge. It's like almost half of the entire meter. But if you really want to get in on somebody, this is definitely the way to do it. It has some creative usage in combos too to make a couple things a bit more stable, but generally this is like the tool of like, okay, it's really hard for me to get in other ways, or I'm getting zoned out. I really, really want to get in the other guy's face to establish some scary pressure, so I'm just going to do this. It's far better at establishing more of like the standard normal-based pressure than just going in with spin. Because you're pretty much always plus on block, like in any situation, even after the forward teleport, which is very surprising. Mostly because you can usually get the teleport out before the projectile's even active, and since it's +5 on block even if it's on its own, you can pretty much always create a plus range situation at the cost of about half of your so that covers it for all of the specials that actually generate blood gauge. But now you may be thinking, okay, well, I have normals and stuff that help me cover blood gauge, but like, come on, that's not enough. Like, I gotta be able to do it in some other way. Well, thankfully, Nago has this. This is 623P. It is a command verb that's very reminiscent of Slayer from previous versions of Guilty Gear. Familiar with that. And this command grab is very, very powerful for a wide variety of reasons. This really just like this command grab really just kind of does it all. It's a little bit on the slower side, but most command grabs in this game. It's 7 frame startup, which really is not that bad. But this thing has a lot of variations. First of all, by virtue of a command grab, it's always going to beat a regular throw if it's done. Because command throws in this game are generally invulnerable. So if you think that they're gonna try to like reverse throw you or wake up throw or something, you can just kind of do this a little bit. Median will beat it out of it. Secondly, if you want to hit me a couple of times, and then I do this command throw, you'll see that it actually heals me.
Pretty good jump too.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, let me just do this to verify. Okay, yeah. So you actually get quite a bit of extra health if you do this when you're at a higher blood level. And that's actually relative to the fact that, at least according to what the Dust Loop says, you actually get like 15% of the damage that you deal from the grab back as recovered health. So since being at a higher blood level is naturally going to allow you to do more damage on all your stuff, you get more health back. Next thing, which is really the key thing that I was trying to get to this, is that whenever I do this, it heals the blood gauge by a lot.
Yeah, literally just depleted it.
Yeah, so by sheer technicality, it's not the entire blood gauge, but it is effectively the entire blood gauge.
Yeah.
It literally recovers about 95% of the blood. So pretty much, if you really need to keep yourself out of blood rage, and you think you finally conditioned them to block most of the stuff that you're doing, this will guarantee that you're going to go back to like a zero blood situation. You can start doing special moves again, and you can start crushing people in those. However, there's also a couple of unique quirks about this. So, one thing you might have noticed about Blood Gauge is that whenever I generate it, it doesn't increase the blood gauge fully for that amount right away. It builds over time. Right? So if I do like a whole bunch of stuff, like I did, I basically generated like almost like 2 full blood gauges worth of meter there, but it still took me a couple of seconds to really get everything back,
right?
To build up to that point. Now go ahead and block.
All right.
So you can see that even though I did enough special cancels to easily put myself over into Blood Rage, landing the command grab immediately stopped the temporary cost of blood.
Yeah, and just negated it completely.
Yeah. So one fun application of that by proxy is that if you really decide that you just want to go ham on somebody without like a ton of specials on pressure, if you're confident that you can land the command grab shortly after doing that, you can effectively nullify the blood cost of doing all of that pressure. And furthermore, not only does it temporarily halt all of that cost, it also makes it so that the stuff that you do afterwards doesn't apply blood gauge immediately. So you saw that I was able to do quite a bit of stuff before I even got any of that blood gem.
Right, and there was even a point where, even though it didn't start building up till after the fact, there's still enough of the time where like there's a timer on that command grab. It was still negating it a little bit before it started building back up.
Exactly. So this is why, like, if you've ever watched like Fan play this character, whenever he lands a command grab, he usually just starts going nuts on the special cancel because you have a pretty good window of time to be able to do all of that and essentially accumulate like no risk to yourself on the blood game. So really, Nago's command throw is not a standard command throw. It's actually probably one of the scariest things to get hit by with this character. Which is why you'll see a lot of players, like, when Nago gets close, more often they're a little bit more scared of the command throw than the actual pressure with, like, close S and other associated normals, because, I mean, not only are you resetting yourself in the same situation, you're probably about to deal with a worse version of it. So, really, it's the tool that rounds out just how scary it is. Huh.
Yeah, that's, Yeah, I know that like whenever I play against a Nago, like I'm always trying to watch out for that command grab because of that. Because yeah, it can definitely be it can definitely reset the party in a sense.
Yeah, it really does. It starts the party all over again. So, yeah, so that's basically everything that Nago has special wise. But you can kind of see that even though everything's relatively simple on paper and in a vacuum, there's a lot of very, very powerful tools there that all kind of come together into this absolute monster of a strike.
Gotcha. All right. And then of course he does have his supers as well, and kind of like the same with how some of his specials have like unique properties. Some of his supers also have unique properties to them as well.
Yes, they do. So first of all, let's just go ahead and cover the super that he has when you're not in Blood. He only has one, and it is this. This is performed by doing 6-3-2-1-4-6 slash, or half circle back forward slash. And to me, this is probably one of the cooler cinematic supers in the game.
Mm-hmm.
The end portion definitely gives me Akatsuki Blitzkrieg vibes, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, really the applications of the super are, it's pretty fast on startup after the flash. It is invulnerable on startup. So it's Nago's only reversal, but it's a pretty good one. It has a good hitbox on it. It is pretty respectable damage. And also, actually, this super actually restores a pretty good portion of the blood gauge back. So you see them at, like, level 2 now, basically. And after this hits, I get a pretty good chunk of it back. Like, almost the entire thing from blood level 2.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of situations that can come up where actually landing the super combo can be a very good way to save from tipping too far into Blood Rage, or at least resetting yourself to a better so there are really a lot of nice applications for just this super. And furthermore, if you don't hit clean like this, you get that, which still does an okay amount of damage, even though it's not the full bit. But you can't say okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you don't land the full super, you can still get decent damage off of it, and in some ways, you can even argue that maybe just landing the tip of that is like almost better in certain situations, because the Oki that you get off of doing this teleport is just so valuable.
Right.
We'll get into that a little bit more with basic gameplay, game plan flow, but yeah, so that's pretty handy. The other super, I guess we'll just get into more of like how Blood Rage actually works. Kind of glossed it. Are you actually able to set training mode options to like just keep Blood Rage permanently?
Let me see. It does not look like it for online. It does have that capability.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I will try to set this up as I can. So the immediate thing you can see out of Blood Rage is that my health is draining very, very, very fast.
Mm-hmm.
It is an extremely gross amount of health drain. It's the big reason why most people will tell you that you really just never want to end up in Blood Rage. Now, okay, that's fine and all, but like, I actually get a pretty big boost on like the range on some of my normal. Like, not 5 HP, pretty big.
And fast, too.
Yeah. So, there are benefits to having Blood Rage, where, like, you're slashing heavy slap, a lot of extra range on them and a lot of extra power. But the other thing about Blood Rage is that not only does my health go down, I actually can't do any specials. Like, at all. So that is one of the more unfortunate things about Blood Rage is that it takes away your capability to use special moves altogether. You really are just entirely dependent on your. However, you know, you can still do some creative things with this if you have meter at least, and make it so it's not the complete end of the world. But really, the signature thing about Blood Rage is this. You can see that hit pretty hard.
Yes. Almost 50%.
Yeah. So, this is Zansetsu, which is the same half circle back forward input, but with heavy slash instead of slash.
And to specify, that super is only available when you're in Blood Rage, right?
Correct. You can only do that super while you are in Blood Rage. As you can see, that literally hits you at full screen. So, if the other guy is for some reason pressing anything at all, for whatever reason, you can punish them for it just by existing and having 50 meters, and probably get a counter hit and probably do even more damage. Actually, yeah. Try to do, like, Gunflame.
Yeah, I meant to do Gunflame, I just hit the wrong button.
That's all good.
He did.
Yeah! So, and, of course, you know, it's obviously... Well, I guess I gotta have some build. But, you know, you can obviously cancel normals. There's nothing stopping you from doing it. So really, if you don't want to just let it rip, which is understandable, I can just sit here, play footsies. Oh, I see that my 5H hit you from like almost full speed. I'm just gonna cancel into super.
Yeah. And that still did 60% just about. 65%. Yeah.
So doing that super will immediately take you out of Blood Rage, no matter where you are. However, it is very, very, very unsafe on point. So as tempting as it might be to do it, just to save yourself from Blood Rage, you still want to be careful with it because you can still get punished pretty badly. Of course, if you have 100, really, really. Actually, you know, you can't even really do this. So you would think, oh, well, maybe I can just Roman cancel the super and, you know, get out of Blood Rage, and unfortunately, that's not how that works.
Wow.
It does unfortunately still keep you in Blood Rage if you Roman cancel the super. So you end up spending 100 here for basically nothing, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So you do kind of just have to bide your time, settle with the Blood Rage time, fish for opportunities with 5H if you can, because you still do chip damage. Still have like basically a full screen bow. But other than that, your options in Blood Rage are just so that's kind of just a basic breakdown of like what it's like to be in a Blood Rage state. The fact that you have an extra super after it, which is a very powerful super on its own. But the fact that you don't have access to any special moves while you're in Blood Rage is a major inhibitor and a big reason why you generally want to avoid that state.
Gotcha, yeah. That makes sense. Alright, I think that, so we went over his key normals, we went over blood gauge, how it worked, went over his specials, and we went over his supers and everything. So, to you, as far as Nago goes and everything, to you, what is the game plan with this character? Like, how do you see this character being at his most effective?
So, to me, this character is really just the emphasis here is close range and mid range dominance for sure, and really your blood level dictates a lot of what you want to be doing at a given point in time. And there are a lot of different ways to utilize that, kind of depending on playstyle and how you want to flow with the character. But generally, since your mobility is very limited, usually, if you're not already in space, you probably want to use stuff like 2S or 5S to fish for opportunities in there. Maybe something like 2H if you think they're going to go airborne. And then as soon as you get some kind of a clean hit, you definitely want to transition to your offense as soon as possible. So one of your standard, really basic combos that you want to get pretty familiar with is to do 2S and a 214H, and then immediately do 6H afterwards. So doing 6H as an OTG after a hard knockdown is really what sets up a lot of generally good things for this character.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, between the amount of blood gauge that 6H recovers and the actual cost of the teleport, it effectively makes that forward teleport free in terms of blood cost.
Sure.
Like it's actually better than net zero. It's net recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, because of the timing, if I do this, I'm in your face and basically able to hit a button immediately as you're doing it. So, and the closer you are to the corner, the easier it is to just hit close S. But even if I just do 5K or 2K, you have to respect this.
Right.
Or at the very least, you have to decide if you're going to do a reversal, or there's a legitimate reason for you to have to make an active decision after 60 forward teleport. So really, any situation where you have a hard knockdown that you create, especially off of a spin, you generally want to go into this almost every time so that you can start immediately establishing closer pressure. Other situations that can help you do this, if you land a random 2H, you can actually teleport twice and create the same booties. Little, slightly more costly on blood, maybe not. But yeah, you see, I just immediately am right on top of you with a close S, which is fairly easy. And that's just because you got hit by a random 2H. And not only that, but this is round start position. Now suddenly you're all the way in. Which means that anything that I could do to you is going to lead to a ton of damage off of combos that are a lot easier to stop.
Right.
Target combo can also kind of fit the situation for you. If you time the forward dash carefully afterwards. So even if you're just fishing with this, you kind of want to do this.
Okay.
So in terms of close range marker, I've talked about close S quite a bit. +3 on block. Launches on hit, you can kind of hit confirm it into a lot of nice things. There's plenty of creativity there. Stuff with 6H, I've mentioned how 6H in the backdash is +2 on block. That's also a very valuable tool. And really, when you're exercising your close range pressure, it's very helpful to get familiar with how to create a lot of frame trap situations. This character doesn't have a lot of raw mix-up to him. It really is just a strike-throw character, fundamentally. But just, a couple things that are useful to know are close S into 6H is a true block string thing, but you can stagger the 6H. So if they're mashing, when you delay it, then you can get a big counter hit, and 6H counter hit usually leads to probably about 70% damage, even with no risk gauge built up, if you do the combo correctly.
Sheesh.
So yeah, there's very high threat there, and then of course, even if you just do it as a block string and a backdash, it still hits. I can use it set up to make 2S poke. To beat their counter poke attempt, things like that. Other things that are useful, 5K 6H is a natural frame trap. But it gets a little weird when you have higher blood levels because the faster H startup means that more things become like true strings. But generally, if you do 5K into 6H and they match, it's like a 3-count hit, essentially. So that can be a nice pressure string to do, but it's fairly simple when you go into like a back dash. And then, of course, once you've gotten them scared of all of these frame trap situations that can lead to tons of damage, you can get creative and then do like a forward dash into like a throw or something like that. Also, worth noting, again, this is a game where reversal DPs are strike and vuln, but not throw and vuln. So if I just do like a knockdown, you need to like wake up DP. I can still beat out the DP with a command grab. Or even if I just like do the command grab and wake up DP.
There it is, yep. Punish, yep.
Yeah. So you can beat up, weak up DPs on speed with another command throw and kind of establish that as an target pressure. And then, of course, the other major thing to talk about is that, again, when you're doing a lot of these things, your blood level is obviously considered. And really, one of the most important things you want to get sure you get more polished with a character is really getting comfortable with how to get to level 2 blood and how to stay there as much as possible. So, like, here's another good example for something that you might want to learn. I'm just going to do this combo and then quickly explain it.
Okay.
So, as you can see, that's a starter with like a standard 2S and 2 and 4H. But then you special cancel the 2 and 4H into a 63H, and then cancel that into a 236K. So, it's spin, uppercut, forward dash, and then you just kind of mash S afterwards to get close S into RS target combo. This particular combo is really nice because, as you can see, I did this from round start. And I was actually able to set up a wall break in the game. So you do close S to be able to get the wall break afterwards. And I'm almost at level 2 blood, just off of doing that series. Did a good chunk of damage. It was from a round start position, and now I have positive bonus. So, the fact that that's available from round start and it's very consistent minimal practice, really just sets you up for the world for really the rest of the round. I'm already very close to level 2 blood, and like if you're kind of sitting at this range where you're like very close to level 2 but not quite there, like backdashing. Like 1 or 2, just to put yourself right over the edge there, and now I have access to all of these really gross, like, essentially zoner tools as norms that allow me to really dominate the round and basically fast. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that I like to do personally, that if I know that I'm sitting around level 2 blood, I'll even just just do like random backdashes and slowly build up the blood gauge so I can sit in this comfortable level where I can hit 2H, 5H, stuff like that. And so even if I'm in like this weird neutral position, I can poke people in the corner. If I see that my 5H hits off of random poking, I can react, forward dash in the face with another 5H. And the range is so big that it's so hard to contest, and people are matching. Slowly push them into the corner, and now I'm able to basically do whatever I want at that point. And even if they're blocking, you're still dealing a ton of chip. They still have to figure out how to navigate it. I'm still in a position where I can very safely just random backdashes and control to be able to keep myself at level 2 blood. And you know, even though I'm not in the position to establish the nasty corner pressure that this character is known for, I can still be extremely oppressive in like even in a neutral situation. Um, so even if you're not the kind of player that wants to like go ham on pressure or do a whole lot of things, if you just feel like being really lazy or feeling out the opponent, um, just doing stuff like this to manipulate your blood level and keep yourself at level 2 allows you to get a ton of mileage doing really not a whole lot. Which again to me is like kind of the there's so many play styles that can work just because of the tools that he's
Yeah, it's definitely yeah, definitely learned a few things with how this character operates for sure. Because yeah, I always like, I guess like I've always seen those normals for his heavies. The hitboxes getting better, bigger, and everything, but I guess it just never like registered mentally as far as like it being broke down in a sense, you know. So I think it's a lot of good information with this character, especially with how, you know, once you utilize all of his tools that he has and everything, you can tell how much of a threat this character could definitely be.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you know, the level of creativity that we're already seeing with a lot of players of this character, like the combo potential that's there, like a lot of these combos look like they're probably like a little complicated to perform, but once you understand how the special canceling works, like you have so much creativity. There are so many very cool things that you can do that are not even necessarily all that hard, and they can lead to a lot of things.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's just so much cool freeform stuff that you can do with a little bit of practice.
Very nice, very nice. Well, I think it's definitely a good starting point for everybody as far as learning Nago, and I think you did an amazing job breaking him down with showcasing everything that he has and everything. So, Argenrost, once again, I definitely do appreciate your time in showcasing this and everything. Before we wrap up, tell people where they can find you, especially if they want to try to get some more matchups and try to get some more knowledge on how Nagoryuki works. We're going to hit you up at.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so my tag on basically everything social media is Argenrost. I'm mostly available on Twitter. I'm pretty open to just like if people want to ask me questions about things, like I have no problem bringing basically whatever. You'll probably get a lot more detailed of an explanation than you probably asked for on the surface, but I like to be very thorough with my questions and make the things understood. Because I like to think that even though I probably get a little too detailed at times, I think I like to try to be able to explain to people in a way that they can kind of relate to, just really let it click. So really, Twitter is probably the best place to reach me. If you find me on Discord too, that's also a pretty good outlet. I still get a lot of people that ask me stuff about me every once in a while on there. So yeah, I mean, feel free to hit me up on Twitter, ask me questions. I'm pretty much down to help out as much as I can.
Awesome, awesome, yeah. And again, I'll also have his, Argan's Twitter information linked on the YouTube upload to this as well and everything. It's also up on the description as well. So, yeah, like I said, Argenrost, I've known for quite a few years. One of the, smartest fighting game players that I've definitely come across and everything. And also just a genuinely awesome person, too. So definitely hit him up for information, especially when it comes to Nagoryuki and just fighting games in general. So, Argan, with that said, man, once again, dude, I greatly appreciate your time. Thank you so much for doing this, and yeah, let's do this again soon with maybe doing some matchups and stuff like that and everything.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to. I mean, there's definitely a lot that I probably could have covered that I didn't, and maybe a little bit too improv. But I mean, I'm always down to come back and do this. I had a lot of fun doing this.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it was great, and I think there's enough information with this for a really good starting foundation for Nago players. So all good on that front, my man. So With that said, that's going to go ahead and do it for us. Again, you can find Argenrost on Twitter at Argenrost. You can also find me on Twitter at _RCB_TV. That's where I do post all my updates as far as when I do stream and stuff like that. Expect the YouTube upload of this video later in the week. It will be either Friday or Saturday when the YouTube version of this is up for people to go back and check out. And with just like all the other tutorials that we've done, I will have timestamps for each spot of the video breakdown, to where, like, in case you need to go back and review some information, or if there's just a certain part that you want to go to check out and everything, you'll be able to do that all with the timestamps as well. So thanks to everyone who came through. Hey FGC, once again, thank you so much for the raid. Pinoy, I saw that sub. Thanks for the tier 1 sub as well. Greatly appreciate that as well. And yeah, we'll do another Guilty Gear Strive character tutorial sometime next week. I'm hoping I could try to get some character tutorials for Anji, Milia, and Leo are the 3 that I'm trying to target next for the future series of the character tutorials here. So definitely stay tuned for those. I'll have information for that as well. So guys, once again, thank you so much for the time. Thank you, greatly appreciate you guys watching. We'll check you out next time. Take care and be easy.